what you're becoming, because your greatest potential is living inside us all. That's some of the messages from Adam Woods, the guest on my podcast today. Adam talks openly about his journey, about how Hoffman changed him 5 years ago, but also the journey he was on to help him become who he is now. We talk about lots of things on this podcast. It's slightly longer than the normal versions we put out because we let the conversation run. But there's so much information packed in there. As a human being, I know you'll learn from it. As a business person, I know you'll learn from it. As a father, a mother, a daughter, a son, you'll learn from it. Because Adam's been on this journey himself, and he's helped look at what he needs to do to help him understand what he needs to change. Because as it says on the side of the tin for Hoffman, when you're serious about change, that's the key. So for Adam, he's serious about change. He's made this. And I hope you pick up some of those key nuggets from this conversation. Because in that, I'd love you to listen to the story that he talks about with Michelangelo and how what he found as a sculptor is actually living with all of us. Enjoy the show. And as always, if you have comments or questions, please drop me a note, phil@igniumconsult.com, or look out for this show and send me a review, send us notes, but also who else do you think would benefit from this conversation? Because actually, if we can't get out to other people, we can't bring our message to the world. So please feel free to send this to other people to let them know what they can do to reignite their passion, reignite their spark, and build themselves. Enjoy the show. So welcome to the Sparks by Ignium podcast. My name's Phil Rose. I'm the host of the Sparks show. And as you know, Sparks is about creating that imagination, rekindling that passion and building that purpose that you have in your business and in your life. And today I'm delighted to welcome back to the show, Adam Woods. Adam and I met in 2016 as part of our Hoffman journey. It was September, as I recall. It was a warm September week when we were excluded from the world by choice, having to put our mobile phones in a bag, taking ourselves away and spending a week in sunny Seaford. Not that we were there to see the sun, we were there to discover ourselves and find out about some of the patterns we've been running in the past. For me, one of those patterns came up in terms of me getting out to do exercise all the time as a way of alleviating other things. But in this show today, I'd like to really talk to Adam and just go deeper than our last conversation about some of the things we went through and maybe to explore where we've been in this last 5 years and what we've done as a result of that Hoffman journey. So without further ado, I'm welcoming Adam Woods. Adam, as I mentioned before in the last show, was a cameraman. He was a director. He stood behind the camera directing and understanding what things do. He understood how to set up TV stations. But actually what he does now is help people build their confidence in front of the camera. And more importantly, he helps people tell their story. So I'm hoping in this story now, Adam and I can start to tell our story, and hopefully that will be a benefit to people listening wherever they are. So Adam, welcome back.
Thanks, Phil. I really appreciate you inviting me back, and really looking forward to the conversation and seeing what evolves from our reconnection.
Yeah, I think that, and it's interesting what evolves. I think you and I started this conversation. We're a little bit late starting because I said I was a little bit late back because it's Remembrance Day today, and I'd been out for a short walk with the dog just to get out of the office and remember and think. So I found myself in the fields a little bit further away from home and arrived back late. And I apologized to you about that. And you said, "Don't worry, it's just time." And I thought that's an interesting way to start, maybe, because I was late and I was slightly getting anxious about it, thinking I should be there at 11:15. I wasn't. And you said that's okay. And you used an Eckhart Tolle quote, which I think was really interesting. Can you remember what you said?
Well, it's something to do with a relative appreciation of what time is. Eckhart Tolle, for those that might not know, wrote this very powerful book, one of his books called The Power of Now. And he talks about the difference between clock time, which is our relationship to the time that the world agrees is, now, and the present moment, the now. And his invitation is that in moments when you're waiting or that things aren't happening according to the time you've agreed, you think you want things to happen, is just to appreciate the moment. So actually, whilst I was waiting for you, I was just sitting, relaxing, bringing myself to the present moment, and to allow things to sort of just be, as opposed to being in my head and trying to think my way through and think, oh, Phil's not here, I'm impatient, I'm busy. We live in a demanding world where we create lots of agreements to do with time and to a certain extent pressure we create for ourselves. I've learned a lot, and perhaps Hoffman was part of that. Kicking off that journey was 8 days where you had no connection with the outside world, given beautiful food and being this beautiful environment in order to get to know yourself better.
Mm.
And I think, all of us have an opportunity to do that, because the story and the level of which we're evolving our stories probably in relationship to the amount of time we give ourselves to really understand who we are and
Yeah.
what our story is, and where we're going in the world.
I think that's interesting. You use that word, evolving our stories, and we'll come back to storytelling in a little while. But I think it's about evolving it. Me and you are of similar age. We've been through a different journey, but actually, the key to being on Hoffman was actually our journey was irrelevant because it was our own personal journey. Sorry, it was irrelevant to other people. It was our own personal journey. Is what I meant to say there. And I think the key is that when we're evolving our stories, we grow up with our story about who we are, what we do, and how we fit in the world. And that key there about appreciating the present, because actually what got us to this point, I always use the word, as Marshall Goldsmith said, won't get you there. His book, What Got You Here Won't Get You There, is I think one of the key bits around just helping understand what is it that we need to do differently from this moment onwards to change the way we want to perceive the future. It may not be anything, but actually it's just reflecting on, has
I
what
love
I've
that.
had in the past served?
Yeah, I think there's something really interesting in that. I remember meeting someone at a conference around that time, and I probably was talking about something I'd done in the past, and I'd collected all my titles in my business of vice president of this and executive creative director of that, and he said, "Oh, I'm not so much interested in what you've done. I'm interested in who you are," and it really connected deeply with me. And at Hoffman, I came into this. For those that don't know, Hoffman Process is a sort of residential. When you're serious about change, is their sort of moniker, and it's a sort of deep reflection retreat time to get to know yourself and let go of parts of you that haven't been maybe serving you. And there's a lot of exercise and experiential things you go through, rituals. And this point about what I discovered is I was carrying lots of bags around behind me in my rucksack, sort of weights of jobs I'd done, expectations I had, roles that I was playing. And what a lot of them were doing was weighing me down from the past and not allowing me to be who I am in the present and being flexible and playful to who I'm becoming. Um, and being quite a shy person and quite a private person, being with these strangers for 8 days, I found myself starting to relax and become more present and be more playful, so that when I came out of that process and went back into the world, as it were, I was able to start being and practicing being more present to who I was becoming. I think for a lot of us in business, that there can be an expectation that we either have around our business or around what we think about of work, is that it's a label and there's an expectation of our responsibility or our pride or our experience that we're holding this sort of image or this story of who we should be. And actually, Eckhart Tolle again, which has got an amazing quote. He says, "Sometimes letting things go is an act of far greater power than defending or hanging on." And I found that I had to let go of a lot of the ways I was doing things in order that I could create some space to just refresh and begin again.
Yeah, do you know, it's interesting, isn't it? That letting things go is a far greater power. I think there's a very interesting thing there. I just want to come back on a couple of other things you talked there, actually, because you've just given me loads of food for thought just in talking. And often with these podcasts, we go off track because of things that come up like that. And I want to connect two stories together. And yesterday I mentioned to you, Adam, that I was recording a podcast with Jackie Jarvis, and she just completed her 6th Camino trail, having walked 3,500 kilometers plus in the last 6 years on those trails. And one of the stories she tells, which really resonates when you're talking there, was she said when she walked on that first Camino 6 years ago, she took her enormous rucksack full of all her worldly possessions. And she suddenly found it was frustrating her. So one day she threw her rucksack down on the floor and realized that burden on her back was part of the problem. So she came to the next village. She started giving things away, including the bucket she had taken with her because she thought she needed to fold it bucket. So she got things away. And so over this last 6 years, she now takes less and less. And she now purposely books flights where you can't take more than hand luggage. She was away for a 2 weeks walk with a small hand luggage. And the key bit she said there is all this stuff was weighing me down, this baggage from the past. And I think there's a really interesting parallel in having had 2 podcast recordings within 2 days in that conversation about what's the
Mm,
stuff on our back that we're shouldering
mm.
that actually we don't need to shoulder, but we carry on with it. And fast forward that, there's some bits there about letting go. So I love that piece, that connection you're making there around letting go of stuff.
And sometimes we don't know what we're holding on to. Sometimes we don't recognize the pain or perhaps the grief or the difficulty it's creating in our lives until, say, you work with a coach or your difficulties get to a certain extent. For me, I had to reach certain crises in my life in order to kind of realize that the pain of trying to hold on to who I was far, was creating more difficulty in my life than if I needed to let go. So it required me to kind of almost have a crisis in order to
Mm.
start to realize how to let go. And one of the things I do in my coaching now is hopefully help people before that point of crisis to gently and assertively in some way point out, their potential or who they're becoming or maybe unconscious habits or things or
Yeah.
behaviors that perhaps are getting in the way of who they more naturally are, more instinctually are, more heart-filled are. And, I think running a business is an incredible journey. For me, particularly, I've just started really running my own business in the last 2 years. And it's really forced me to confront a lot of my habits and beliefs because I am my business. And there's a way in which, my identity is wrapped up with that of my business. And so for me, I think the invitation is always to lean into the discomfort sometimes of things when they're not going well. There can be a great lesson in that. And
Yeah.
the challenge is when things are not going well, is of course, all our defense mechanisms come off and we go into defense mode. We, like you were saying, exercise, we get busy, we distract, we deflect on other people, we blame other people. And actually, the invitation is to kind of go inside and go, okay, this is interesting. This is like stirring up something in the pot. What's the lesson here? There's
Yeah.
great lessons in difficulty.
And I think it's really interesting. You talk about being a business owner, and you're relatively new to it in the sense because you made some choices during the pandemic when it started. And you told me last time in that story about your work in your previous role dropped off a cliff, literally, in terms of that work dried up. So you had to transform, and you went from being and I love this, and maybe it's my description rather than yours, but being behind the camera to being in front of the camera and noticing the vulnerability of being in front of the camera. And to me, there's a real interesting metaphor there about when you then start your own business, because you're running your business, and I come back to the fact that most people know technically how to do what they do. You're brilliant at directing people and helping them do what they do, and you've spent a lot of time learning how to do that. And not a lot of people know how to run a business because they're not taught how to run a business. That's not what people do. They just have this technical ability. And some people choose not to learn how to do that. They just find their way forward, find a way through it. Others go out their way, and you mentioned about coaching, and find someone to carry them on that journey, to go with them, walk alongside them. And it reminds me of that phrase, which I always say, success leaves clues. And if you follow those clues, you can do the same as other people. And I think that's the same as this Hoffman journey. It's actually reflecting on what is it I need to do differently? How do I confront my habits and beliefs that aren't helping me, that are hindering me in my way of building my business? Because often our identity gets tied up in, I'm a business person, I do this. And then it
Mm.
always reminds me of that phrase, this is who I am. But the be do have rather than have do be. What's the key that we want to bring out to our business around, if you wanted to be something different, what would you need to do right now to change?
That's a great invitation. And I think to your point about, I knew like probably 3 years, I mean, after Hoffman, so that's 5 years ago. So probably like a year or so after that, I started realizing that the way I was doing business, I was flying around the world making commercials and short films for CNN and different organizations. And whilst I loved the creative challenge of it and maybe some glamour attached to flying around the world and doing these working with some really interesting people, I realized that the gloss or the glamour of it was actually hiding a sense of, I wouldn't say, well, let's call it dis-ease. I wasn't in
Mm,
flow, and and so what I did was pay attention, start to pay more attention to my feelings and to why these things weren't working for me, and I guess that was a form of letting go. It's like So if I'm not getting as much joy out of doing this than I used to, what's the
Mm.
invitation here? So it was a slow process for me, and I realized that the bit that I loved in what I was doing was when I was with someone and the camera was on them, and we might, it might be a big film crew and lights and stuff, but there was a really intimate connection between me behind the camera and the person in front of the camera, and creating an, a moment that was captured on film where there was a sort of breakthrough and emotional catharsis. And that's partly why sometimes we go to the cinema or the theaters, that
Mm.
storytelling and sharing kind of open-heartedly who we are and what we do creates a really energetic effect on the audience. And I think we've all been to shows or, maybe with musicals or with opera, but different they take us on a journey, and
Yeah.
actually just someone telling their own story is a form of theatre. And so
Yeah.
I found that was the bit that I really loved. And so the question then was, how can I do more of that without having to fly around the world with a film crew?
Yeah.
And that's
Yeah.
what led me into coaching and using the camera as a means to unlock, in this case, confidence, but in some ways just someone's story. So they're able to share more of who they authentically are, all warts, all fears,
Yeah.
all fully expressed. And there's something very powerful when you do that, that actually there's a weight can be lifted off. And sometimes when I'm working with clients and we recognize that there's a part of us we've kept hidden, and then
Yeah.
we explore that, and that can take guts and courage.
Yeah.
But once it's explored, once we're aware, you can't then become unaware, and it
Yeah.
creates that catharsis, which I think can help unfold, a new chapter or a new sense of. And I think the challenge for me as a coach is to always remain open to what will evolve and be present in the moment, like we are now.
Yeah. Yeah.
We're not scripted. This is just
Yeah.
happening.
Just a
Who
conversation.
knows how this is going to go? So,
Yeah. Uh,
um,
and it's interesting. You always stimulate ideas in my head and we're talking, and there's a and just think about some of the things, and there's such a relationship in terms of that exploring that hidden side. And you mentioned about once you're aware of something, and it reminds me of the Oliver Wendell Holmes quote about the mind once expand can never go back to its original state.
mm,
And I think once you become aware of something, you just have that in your awareness. It's out there. And I think
mm,
that's one of the things that, for me, Hoffman did was just make me aware. And we often talk in Hoffman terms about patterns. And one of the things around Hoffman is, identifying those patterns. And for those who won't be able to see me, I'm holding up to Adam now a little thing which I still carry on my desk, which is the Hoffman tools card, which I still have. And it talks to me about some of the tools that we should be aware of. And one of the keys I see around is we often forget. It's very easy to get carried away in the stream of doing things and forget about the things that are important to us. And I think that's one of the things that Hoffman does. It makes you just reflect on where you are and be really present to those thoughts, but also then remembering to do things. We talked about the quadrinity was one of the things that Hoffman talks about in terms of balancing your emotions with your intellect, with your physical and with your spiritual side, those four things coming into balance. And when you were talking there about your journey and telling your story, you mentioned about theatre. To me, there's something there. Good theatre or good films, they connect with your intellect, but they really connect at your emotional level, and they generate some emotion physically in you. You get that sensation, but also there's some spiritual side that often goes with them as well. We maybe don't think about that in some films or theatre, but if you looked at those four things, how they come together, I think that's what tells a good story. So if you can get people in front of your camera to bring out that the thinking side, the feeling side, the emotional side, and the spiritual side, I think you can really connect with people's essence at heart.
yeah. I think it's a lot about energy, and there's a lot about energy work, that we are all energy, and that
Yeah.
our subconscious is working at a far deeper and faster and more profound way than our conscious mind. So it's not just the words we're saying or the pictures we're painting. It's our whole energy, our whole space, the whole way we express ourselves, and
Mm.
also just in silence. There was one exercise I did. I have this free community called the Camera Confidence Club, where business owners can come and practice. It's free and it's safe, supportive place for people to practice bringing themselves to the camera. And we did a week where everyone just came on camera and just did nothing, and just sat there and live or on video and said nothing, and just would looked at the camera and felt being looked at. And it was very powerful, that silence. And people commented on like what it made them feel, people looking at each other's videos and lives, how what I saw in you without any
Mm.
words.
Yeah.
Very, very powerful. So there's this sense of being fully expressed. And I think something I want to touch on about what you've talked about in the Wendell Jones quote is that there's far greater potential living inside of us than we, possibly could even see and understand. And perhaps understanding is the wrong thing to say, is just realize. Um, I love this piece. I was thinking about this, us talking today, and I was reminded about this lovely, powerful quote by Michelangelo, the great
Right.
sculptor and artist. And he says, "The sculpture is already complete within the marble block before I start my work. It's already there. I just have to chisel away the superfluous material." And what I love about potential and visioning is that there's a far greater potential alive in us right now. And part of the process of realizing that is to cut away the superfluous material.
Mm.
And that's part of what I love doing in coaching, but also,
Yeah.
a lot of other ways in which we can bring that potential and through our business.
Yeah.
What is our business's story? Have we ever stopped to think about what that is? Because you know what, someone joining your business, do they really understand the story of your business?
Mm. Mm.
And that really powerful piece when you're onboarding new members into the organization, it's like, do they really understand the story? Where have you come from? What's your origin story? Maybe what's your hero journey? What's your
Mm.
vision?
Mm.
And how you can energetically bring that to life. Film is a great way of doing that.
Yeah.
Not the only way, but it's a great way of kind of embodying that vision so that people get a real sense of, this is an organization that really knows where it's going and understands where it's come from.
Yeah.
And I think particularly younger, younger people joining the workforce these days are looking for organizations to belong to that feel that they're really being cared for and looked after.
Yeah.
So I think, if you're not doing that in your business and you're looking to expand, to really think about how you can convey that to people
Yeah.
coming to join you.
I think that's a really powerful thing, isn't it? And I think you're right. Trying to get that cultural essence of what it is. I was talking with someone recently, and it's always close to my heart around this word culture, but also linking culture to purpose. I'm really passionate about making sure businesses have a purpose at heart, whatever that purpose is, be it an environmental purpose or a social purpose or a community purpose, but actually doing something that means something to people. And you get people, we always use this phrase, willingly on your bus. And to get willing on your bus, you have to buy into that culture, because you may not like what I'm doing. In that case, you're not fit for our company. It doesn't seem they don't like you. It's just the culture's different. And that piece there about the Michelangelo chiseling away to find the sculpture inside. I think every business owner has that. They have that business in mind. And I come back to the phrase that most business owners don't make money on their first business. It's the second or third, because that's when they find their authentic self. They find what really works. And if you can find that, chisel away, you've got this great idea of building something. Once you take it away, you realize actually what you're trying to build, like the peel layer of an onion. It's when you get to the core of the onion, you find out the real essence of your business. And
Yeah,
that's the key.
I think there's a key thing. I love that second business idea, Phil, because there's a real sense of humility in that. And it's like this notion of learning from things that don't go well. Learning from your mistakes is the fastest learning process. And by the way, I don't like necessarily, I mean, the word mistake just means you've tried and it's not quite hit the goal. And that's a great learning experience, isn't it?
I
So,
love that.
you miss 100% of the goals you don't actually take.
Did you know, I
So,
love that. I love that also from a filmmaker's point of view, because I'm not a filmmaker, but you often take, and actually if you're mistaking it, is that just let's do it again, just get it right, because
yeah.
actually what I want as the director behind the camera may be something different to the way you're portraying it. So how do I get you to do what's in my head? And that's sometimes really hard if you're having someone else pulling your strings. Whereas if
Yeah.
you're in front of the camera being authentic, actually maybe there isn't a thing as a mistake. It's just that's what's natural.
Well, it's a really interesting role as a director. One of a great director of photography I worked with he said, Adam, it was had a big crew and it was working in Saudi Arabia actually. It was a really interesting culture to work in and quite difficult actually in some ways. And he said, it's really interesting watching you. You're like a psychotherapist, you know what everyone's doing, you're aware of everyone's kind of needs, but you're not necessarily telling everyone what to do. And I think what's really interesting about this sense of liveness, which I try to bring more and more, and I'm coaching a lot about in November at the moment, about how you bring yourself live on
Yeah.
camera, but to your business, is that there's a great deal of uncertainty there. You know, you don't know what's going to go. So, like as a director, I prepare really to the nth detail, being a little bit of a perfectionist and a workaholic. I prepare really, really a lot. And then in the moment when the camera's rolling and something's happening, it's just like, let's just see what happens. So it's a really interesting, and I think I'd love to see that more in, you know, how we bring ourselves to our businesses, is that this, for me, this playful side of like, yeah, of course, we need to bring our mind and our notions of how we want to structure and to create processes and you know, in order to derive profit.
Mm.
But in the moment when you bring your presence into your business, can you be alive to what's happening in front of you? Because humans are, you know, uncertain energy balls of of
Yeah.
of all kinds of things happening. So if you're paying attention in the moment, a bit like we said at Eckhart Tolle, if you're in the right now and you're connecting,
Yeah.
think amazing things can happen. And also, what's really important, people feel listened to. So if you go into a conversation, you have this preconceived idea of what you want out of it, or like a meeting,
Yeah.
like, all right, I need these, this is my agenda. And like agenda's like this sort of piece of concrete. It's like, no, throw it away. Just see what arises. I mean, have an intention,
Yeah.
but don't have an expectation. Let
Yeah.
go of the outcomes and
And of
see
course,
what happens.
as a coach, that's exactly the premise that I, as a coach, and many other coaches will have the view. You know, we're here to serve the client, to make sure that we can guide you on that journey, but we're not anchored to your outcome. We're anchored to, let me phrase that, we're not out anchored to our outcome. We're anchored to help you get where you want to go. But what you need from this journey is what you need, not what I need. I need to ask you questions to help you on that journey. So if I sit down with a pre-prescribed agenda, that's my agenda, not yours.
I have a slightly different take on this, and
Yeah.
I'll just put it out there as a slight piece of provocation. You know, I deliberately haven't. This is a bit, you know, heinous, perhaps. I haven't trained as a coach. I deliberately didn't want to kind of create a kind of mental structure in what I did. I want to use all my intuition as what I've learned as a human and as a filmmaker and as a person unlocking and listening and really paying powerful attention to people's stories of unfolding in front of me
Mm.
so that they feel fully expressed. And what I believe happens, like we're happening here, is we're serving each other at an equal level. And there's a third mind. I call it a mastermind, which is kind of happening above us or beyond us, which is like when two people get together and really create connection, something magnificent or different can
Mm.
happen.
Mm.
So in coaching, I think, yes, of course, there is the client coach relationship, and therefore you're in a space where you're in it, use the word serve, serving another's needs. But I think for me, it's actually co-creation,
Yeah.
that I bring
Yeah.
myself fully into the conversation and
Yeah.
I share exactly what's coming up for me in the moment, my truth. And so I'm equally invested in that relationship. So
Yeah.
it's not a sort of client coach, it's a sort of collaborative opera.
Yeah.
And I think in that you can get some, and maybe my style of coaching is different from others, but for me it's like a co-creation. What can the two of us together really working on this thing, whatever it is, the issue that we want to work on, how can we bring both our minds in order to evolve something much bigger?
Yeah.
One plus one equals three type of, or plus.
Yeah, and you're right. And actually, if I think about it, you know, I'm an ICF, International Coaching Federation accredited coach, and we often use the word, well, we do use the word co-creation. It's about two people there,
Right,
and maybe I'm
perfect.
using the word serving in a subservient way. It's that equal way to look at how can I do it, and the bit that I think really resonates there. I love your bit about mastermind, because as a coach, we hold the mirror up to people to say, this is what I'm seeing. And I wonder if other people are seeing the same thing. Because if I'm seeing it, maybe you're seeing the same, or other people are seeing the same. So, how do we then work together to co create a new direction that might help you and serve you better?
Yeah,
That's the
and
key.
I also bring myself into that equation. I'm not a sort of a husk. I'm a fully embodied human that has their own. So I will create my own relationship to that so that I'm fully open and
Mm.
authentic in the moment. You know, as a coach, I need to be able to go on that journey, go on that Camino too.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
And this is what's really interesting, I
That's
find
interesting.
with I work with quite a few coaches about getting them more expressed and more visible. And to a certain extent, there's sometimes, without being generic about it, there's a hesitancy about putting themselves out there because it's like it's all about the other person. It's saying, and it's also about you, that you are in this relationship. And for me, it is a relationship that someone wants to go into with a coach.
Mm.
And therefore, if they can't see who you are and you're not bringing yourself out there, say in your marketing on camera, or you're sharing more about your journey, no one really knows who you are. And so you can become disembodied.
Mhm.
And that's not a criticism, it's just an invitation to explore, you know, being more visible, being more open, being more out there so that people understand a bit more about your values and your beliefs and your humanness so that
And
they can.
I'm smiling as you say this, Adam, because I've been challenged by a fellow coach to go out on video. And I've committed to Brian Keegan, if you're listening to this, Brian, by next Friday to make my video. And if I don't make the video, I'm not going to contribute to his charity. And I need to contribute to his charity. So he's challenged me to go out on video because I believe in what he's doing. So,
Yeah.
so there's open invitation because I'm very good at writing stuff, putting stuff out on various social media, but often I'm hiding behind my writing is what I've realized rather than being visible. So interesting when you say about that, you are in the relationship, be more visible. I think there's something there about going on that journey and being honest and truthful because people believe in you when they trust you. And actually the trust comes from that presence of seeing you as opposed to just reading what's on a page.
Yeah. And look, we're a massively over communicated society, at least in the West, and perhaps I'm speaking just from my own experience, but there's so much material out there. And, if you go on Instagram, it's like everyone's putting video out. And so
Yeah.
it, my thing isn't like, oh, video is the sort of be all and the end all of it. It's just that when you have a deep seated message or feeling or experience you want to share,
Yeah.
it can be really powerful for you to share that in your own authenticity. And it's really about context.
Yeah.
If you're doing that on social media, that's a context. It's for me, like a platform like LinkedIn or Facebook is a sort of super highway. You're on a motorway. So in a way, your context is like almost like a advertising hoarding. You kind of have to have a pretty simple message that people get in quite a short space of time in order that they come into your ecosystem. And then, but if someone comes to a webinar or comes to hear you talk, or you release a video that's a bit longer and you kind of unwrap things, then that's a different context. There's a different relationship you can have to how
Yeah.
you talk about your story.
I like that. It's interesting. So do you mind if I just switch gears slightly? Because I think you've triggered off a few thoughts for me there around authenticity, and I wonder, could we go back a little bit and just cast our minds back to the Hoffman journey? Because I think that unpacked a whole load of, I'll use the word stuff, and we'll explain what that means in a minute for us both. And obviously, for those who listened to the first podcast will realize that Adam and I met because we shared a room in Hoffman, and we didn't know each other before that. We've now had a journey we've been on over the number of years, and obviously with the pandemic we haven't seen each other face to face. We've done video since then, but we used to meet in a little coffee and pizza shop, I seem to remember, just off of Regent Regent Street, where
Okay.
you were working. Do you remember?
Oh yeah, I do. Yeah.
Yeah, that little coffee shop, which is closed down now, actually. It was like a pizza place.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
So we haven't seen each other, but let's just go back to that Hoffman journey. So there's a whole load of things there that are worth just exploring, I think, if you're willing to have that conversation
Totally.
around what was it about Hoffman and the process that helped you come out to say, this is me and my full authenticity, as opposed to standing behind the camera in that previous journey. So there's lots of things going on. Now, obviously realize we haven't prepped that. So if that's not appropriate, say so.
Oh gosh, no, there's never anything that isn't appropriate. I love the word appropriate because it's sort of like it's permission based. And for me, it's like I'm all open. It's like, I mean, I have a choice obviously in any moment to share what I want to share, but I think so to your answer, I think the word authenticity has the word author in it. And I think that I was creating, or I had been unconsciously creating a story about myself, which was not really vital or true to who I am. And so I was putting on a front without necessarily seeing it like that. So that the process of being in front of other people and sharing a lot and having a lot of exercise in order that we got rid of maybe attachments to our past, aspects of relationships in our sort of childhood or upbringing. So we could see that whatever happened in the past can be left in the past, and there's a process to do that. so that we can arrive fully, open to who we could become. And one of the
Yeah.
most powerful exercises was sitting up. I think you were in my group, but it was say 5 or 6 of us, and this is towards the end of it, whilst we created trust, which was the key thing, that everyone gave feedback as to who they could see us being more
Yeah.
of,
Yeah.
and what they saw of us, what they saw us sort of like now, but what they could see, that the glimmers of where that could go and suggestions on how we could bring that to life. And it was really, because that can be quite challenging if you're like I am, to a certain extent, still quite
Yeah.
private.
Yeah.
People giving you direct feedback. What I see in you is, and for me, it was like shy, a businessman, which was fascinating. Actually, I've just remembered that. Quite English, quite reserved, polite, and yeah, there was sort of, and the invitation was to have more fun in my life, to go
Yeah.
dancing,
Yeah.
go on dating sites, because I was
Yeah.
in a separating from a long-term relationship. So and they were playful invitation. And so what's this? Oh yeah, you've got your three.
I've got
For
one
those
now.
you,
I've just picked it off the floor because I want to tell you about it. So keep going. I think that, for you, playfulness, go on dating sites, be more of who you are.
yeah, dance a bit more,
Yeah.
and I think, what was lovely was that people could see there was something inside me that wasn't being fully expressed. So I think, and that's still an invitation to me today, is to be more alive,
Yeah.
um, and be playful and joyful, like our true essence is in joy. I believe when we're
Mm.
at most fully expressed, we're in full joy.
Yeah.
And it's at the highest level of consciousness as well. I mean, this is a sort of that beyond courage and love, there's is joy at the highest level of consciousness on the map of consciousness. And
That's
so,
interesting.
the more we are enjoying ourselves,
Yeah.
and I had this thing, and I still have to a certain extent, which is interesting, is that work should be hard. Work is adult work, and it should be responsible. And notice the shoulds in there. And the best effects, the best relationships, the best moments I have in my business are when I'm having fun.
Yeah. And are in flow because of that. It's just
Yeah,
everything starts to work.
yeah.
But it's interesting, isn't it? That thing there. There's a question I'm going to ask you in a minute around, what have you done with that advice you were given from those peers at the time? So let's come back to that in a minute. I'll just put that thought in your
Mm,
head. But it's interesting, as business people, we often have that preconceived idea about what makes a good business, what makes us
mm.
good business people, and that thing about work should be hard. There's always that phrase which people use glibly about, the only place success comes before work is in the dictionary. And for me, I come back to that still because actually there's something about that we do have that ingrained in us. And I'm just listening
Mm.
to an Audible book by Brendan Bouchard, and he talks in there in High Performance Habits around work-life balance. And what does that really mean to us? And how do we get that balance? And how do we integrate our work and our life together? Because actually you can have both.
Yeah, the David White, who I love his poetry, but also he does some great some books, and he does the three marriages, and he talks about our marriage to work, our marriage to self, and our marriage to another. And he poo-poos his idea of balance. Why should life be in balance? Surely it's about not creating harmony, but creating sort of growth.
Mm.
By the way, it's just a choice of words, but I see that. I mean, my life was very much out of balance. So yeah, for me it was about, I think for me it was about creating a sense of equilibrium
Mm.
so that I could manage through the massive changes that were going on in my life at the time, so that I could bring myself, more to the present moment, and then explore what the potential could be.
Yeah, and it's let's come back to that question. You were given some feedback on that thing there about playfulness and being more open with yourself. So 5 years fast forwards, how's that played out for you? And if what's gone on for you in that journey with that type of knowledge that you had that you didn't have prior to that week?
Yeah, it's good invitation. And so one thing that comes up to me is I did eventually. I mean, after separating from my wife of many years, and we did that very consciously and I believe lovingly. Was I did go on a dating site in my 50s, and I met various people, and fortunately I also had I was in therapy at the time, so every time something didn't go right in my head, I was able to take that and explore that and really learn that it's all about my stimulus and response.
Yeah,
So a lot of these old relationship patterns were being stimulated. And I hope I didn't cause anyone harm. But in a way, for me, it was like the knowledge was in the action. I needed to put myself out there to learn what I needed to learn. And yeah, I did meet someone, and we're now in a very loving and hopefully, I believe, long-term relationship.
yeah,
But
yeah.
I needed to grow through that uncertainty. And my gosh, putting yourself out on a dating platform
In your
was one of the
50s.
biggest challenges. Forget business. That was quite, that is still a journey of bringing ourselves fully
Yeah,
open. And yeah, and I think, I think becoming a single father with
yeah,
two boys living with me was trying to tap more into them as their age, not be the dad, but to be more playful with them, even though they're teenagers, and like dad being playful can be a bit can be a bit bonkers.
yeah, yeah,
And to try and manifest more of that my open-hearted self, and that was, that's been a journey
mm,
as well, trying to be less, because I think for me, parenting, one of the things I learned was that example is the best form of parenting. And I realized, trying to tell them what to do or guide them and evoke or have a plan for them or tell them what to do was
yeah,
doomed for failure, and that I had to be a living example of what I
yeah.
could be, or so they could see that around them and then take that into their own lives, up to them to choose.
Yeah, I love that. And I love that being the example there. And actually, if I come back to the words you said just now, you talk about love, courage, and joy. In that I got this idea of this pyramid of hierarchy, effectively. What I heard there is you were very courageous. You made some decisions. You separated from your wife. You took on that responsibility of parenting two boys. You went through that separation, and then you put yourself out there to go and find some other partner. But you went through that journey with
Mm.
therapy in the background. But the bit you talked there is about, you brought your open-hearted self. And I just heard that word joy in there in terms of, being courageous, putting myself out there was really, that's a journey of transformation to get from where you were to where you are now.
Yeah, compare how I was in the Hoffman process. It was, and it's, I don't now, just you telling me that or sharing that has allowed me to see it. And sometimes we don't see what we've become because we're so much
Yeah,
focused on where we are and where we want to go. Actually, sometimes it is useful to go back. I journal a
yeah,
lot and go back and go, oh gosh, yeah,
yeah,
that's really interesting. And that can serve not to be in the past and to
yeah,
carry the past with us, but just say, oh, right, okay, I was that, because we're all potential change. We're always changing. Well, our cells and our body are renewing every 9 days, I think it is, or 9 weeks, or whatever the number is. We're all potentiality. We're all change. So, the invitation is always to look back at, and I believe that it's like, don't regret,
yeah,
don't live in the past. Just bring, you can start again today. You can start your day at any time to
yeah,
bring yourself fully present, and then say, be interested in what you're becoming.
yeah,
That's the fascination of like, how can I evolve into something that I can't see yet? I think this is a really important part of
yeah,
like exercises. Like this morning, I was asked to remind myself of personal peak moments, 20 personal peak moments over my life. What a great question. That it forced me to go back over my entire life and think about where have I been at my peak?
yeah, yeah,
And just by reminding yourself of that could bring you into that energy
yeah,
of like, so yeah, there's always exercises to bring ourselves more into the present, but also to what we're going to become or
yeah.
how we're going to become.
And I think it's interesting, actually. I love your take on reminding, and I don't know if you said that purposely, but I
Mm,
love the word that reminding.
yeah.
Um, as business owners, I think, when I talk about purpose and passion, I think sometimes business owners need reminding of why they set up the business,
Mm,
because they get sucked into this, and at some
mm,
stage they have to cross some chasms on their journey to grow, and often there's cliff faces they might approach as well, and they have to go through that to come out the other side. On our last conversation, we talked about the hero's journey, and often people don't understand the journey they're on as a business person. And when you look back on those 20 peak moments in your life, I think there's some key bits there into also looking at the 20 valleys you had to go through as well to get to where you are now.
mm,
Because the peaks were one part, but what's in the trough that you overcame to come up the other side.
mm,
And as business owners, often we get to where we are, whether a new business owner or not, and we'll have been through some tough times. We'll have had some really great times as well. In the good old days, things were great. Everything was going smoothly. But then it comes downhill again. Everything gets tough. customers start complaining, problems happen, COVID happens, Brexit happens, pandemic happens, whatever it might be. And actually, it's how you manage that thought process to come up with the next bit.
Yeah, I so agree. And I think there's a danger sometimes in a need for security. And I think that the pandemic has taught, for me, I've noticed that living with uncertainty is a great blessing. That your ability to live in uncertainty is a sense of like being flexible to the moment, because nothing is certain, as we know, apart from one thing, which happens, well, some say at the end, but some say it's a transformation. And I love this Chinese proverb, which is go to the center of danger, for there you will find safety. And it's like live passionately, live fiercely. What do you want to do with your one wild and precious life? I just wrote on a newsletter or an email I sent out to my clients today, that Mary Oliver quote, your one wild and precious life. There's always uncertainty, and what danger is whatever we make it want to be, but go to the center of what you perhaps are resisting most, because there you'll find safety, because your ability to handle uncertainty is a true test of how you can then be at home in yourself and just be connected and sort of open to possibility.
And I love that. I love your Chinese proverb there. Go to the center of danger, for there you'll find safety. I think there's really something in there. But what's the vulnerability I need to expose myself to, or be exposed to, or open up to enable myself to move forwards? And again, if I'm a business owner, I'm often hiding behind that role that I run the business. I'm the founder of the business. I'm the owner of this. I can't show vulnerability. I have to show leadership. But what if I don't know the way? How do I manage that? How do I go forward to do things differently? And it reminds me that often my work, I say that I coach in three areas. I coach in the content of the business. I coach in the context of the business. But the real change happens in the content and context of the individual, the personal values and beliefs that happen behind all that. Because often these things that happen in the business actually happen for a reason. And it's what the owner, the founder, is carrying in their own head that is where the real magic happens to transform that. So that's just something that I think fits in there about how do you find that center of danger, because in there, for any business, that's where you find your safety. That's where you're able to go through to this next stage.
It's very much the case. And I remember I heard this gentleman, Ed Milet, who does the Ed Milet show, he's got a great energy, and he came to talk to a conference the other day, and he shared something, which is your business will never outgrow your personal identity. And that for me is like a true reminder. It's like I constantly have to work on myself and with my clients to evolve their sense of self-worth and belief, because their self-worth and belief sets the thermostat on their business.
And I love that in terms of that thermostat. That thermostat, a thermometer tells us the temperature. A thermostat regulates and controls the temperature. And if you've got your thermostat set at too high or too low, you won't go above that.
You're such an engineer. I can see the way your mind's working there. It's like, by the way, that's meant the most beautiful way possible, because, you look at structure and systems, Phil, and it's interesting, and
but it's interesting. I like, your business will never outgrow your personal identity. We talked about identity earlier in terms of what it is about us and who we are and the things we carry with us. And often that's the identity that we think we have to be. It's all around our habits and beliefs and values that got us to this point here, but it doesn't have to be that way going forwards. We can look at the beliefs and habits and values that are valuable to us, but then examine which of those patterns aren't serving us. So if we want to progress and move on, we just need to evaluate, okay, how's that serving me?
Yeah, and also really importantly, and this is kind of core to what I coach in, is it's not about us. That what makes our business are customers. So we need to be passionate about our customer experience, so that when we're delivering a message, it only is relevant in the sense that it resonates inside the hearts and minds of the people listening to it. So unless you're out with your customers, really understanding them and really, really going into their journey, walking in their shoes, and great entrepreneurs, I believe, are obsessed with the customer's experience. So, part of what I do with my clients is like the A of camera is audience. It's like, who are they? Who are your ideal clients or your actual clients? And what is it about them, their needs and fears and whatever you are helping them with, that you can really be attuned to it, because it's not about you.
Yeah.
It's I mean, to your point earlier about service, Phil, it's like,
Yeah.
what is my service to the world? What is the
Yeah.
message that's coming through me to help the world be a better place or help businesses be better
Yeah.
that I can serve?
And I love that in that audience. I know last time, for anyone who hasn't listened to the last podcast, Adam talked about his camera process and actually understanding what's in those 6 steps there. Because I think there's some key bits there, and that audience around what is it you need to do? How do you understand their needs and put that in place to actually make sure your business then can progress? And I think some of this is about letting go of our own self ego to
Mm.
say, what is it I need to do for the other person? Because often
Yeah,
the ego gets in the way and we think we know the best for who
yeah.
we're serving, but actually maybe we don't. Maybe we need to look at what we need to serve for them, and that will throw up more opportunity for the future.
Well, also, I believe, and particularly this time we're recording this around COP26, is um, that I believe entrepreneurs and business are going to be the biggest influence on the planet beyond governments and leaders, because I think the growth of global organizations and the growth of the benefit that organizations can create through innovation and creativity is massive. So,
Yeah,
we're on a larger scale now, and I think our planet and our populations need businesses to stand up and create environments and structures, products and services that really benefit all,
yeah,
that really serve the customer, but also the environment.
yeah,
So who are we not to do that? If we've got that glimmer of our idea of how we want to bring our service to the world, we need to do it.
yeah.
The earth needs us now.
I so agree, and it's interesting. Just last Friday, I was having a conversation about ESG companies, environmental, sustainable, and governance, and how that applies to what you're doing in your business. And to me, that resonates with this word purpose. Let's come back full circle. If you've got a purpose around doing something differently, how can you change humanity? How can you change society? How can you change the environment? How you can do something good? Actually, that's the bit that resonates and get people into your business, because actually it's only when you connect with people and engage them you can then start to help them scale their systems, scale their thinking, scale their business, and that will help us all grow.
Yeah.
So I have a different play on ESG, which is engage at the first point, scale for the second point, and actually that will enable us all to grow over time.
Yeah.
But if businesses can take the lead in that, that's the fundamental
Yeah.
difference. I love that thinking.
And often it can be really simple steps, that people we can get a bit, it's like our circle of concern can be enormous, but actually our circle of influence is much smaller. And what could the small steps we can do today, both to enlarge our vision of where our business can take us, but also the staff that are working with us. If we've got a strong enough why, people will follow us to the ends of the earth. So seeing that your business has got a wider mission in terms of your community, your environment. And for me, it's
Yeah.
the integral models, the integral sense of there's a sort of integral vision on this of like north, south, east, west, and that's another conversation. But
Yeah.
we're all super connected.
Yeah.
So the more we care for the communities and environment around us, it's actually quite selfish because it benefits your business
Yeah, yeah, it
as
does
well.
actually. Yeah, in a virtuous circle, effectively.
Yeah.
Yeah, I love that. So look, we said we'd talk for
Mm.
45 minutes, and I'm sure we've talked for more than that now. So in terms of just closing up here, I'm going to ask you a question here, which is, if you could go back to talk to the younger Adam and give him some advice from this point forward as the 50-plus-year-old Adam, what's that piece of advice that you would love to say, Adam? This is what you need to know.
Well, a filmmaker I greatly admire, Steven Spielberg, said it far better than I did, which is trust that inner whisper. So my advice to me is like, if you have that intuition of like you want to try something, just do it.
Mm,
Because if you don't, you'll potentially live to regret it. And also, probably what holds you back, dear Adam, is your sense of uncertainty or sense of ego or fear that's holding you back from fully expressing yourself. So, yeah, my invitation would be to always not play safe, to always experiment and, yeah, try things, be in full flow.
yeah, I love that. What a way to end. Lovely. Adam Woods, thank you. It's been a pleasure to talk to you. And I'll ask you a question again. You told me the answer last time, but if people want to find you, where would they go looking?
Oh yeah, well, I'm the camera confidence coach, so cameraconfidence.co.uk is my website, and you can just drop me a light on there. I'm Adam Woods on LinkedIn, and on Facebook, Camera Confidence Coach, and you can check out my free community, the
Wonderful.
Camera Confidence Club. So yeah, those are some
Lovely.
of the places you can find me.
Lots of places. You're out there, and that's the key thing. So, Adam,
Yeah.
it's been a fascinating conversation. We've meandered through the river of Hoffman. We've meandered through the journey of business. We've meandered through the confidence world. And I think there's so many quotes I've written down here as we're going through that I'm going to write these quotes up in the show notes for people to capture them, because I think some of the key bits come out for me, and just those snippets that you've taken away there. And I think there's some that I'll just reflect on for a long time in terms of how do we move ourselves forwards, leaving the attachment to the past to enable us to go forwards with all this confidence that we need, because actually we can do what we want to do at the end of the day. And the bit you said there is there's a greater potential living inside each of us. If only we realize it, like Michelangelo said, actually we do is chip away at the outside and the beauty will appear in the inside.
Yeah, get rid of the stuff that doesn't serve you, all the stuff that's unnecessary. Elimination of the unnecessary.
I love that. Adam, thank you. Pleasure to
Thank you,
talk to you as
Phil.
always. Thank you.
Yeah, pleasure.